it's Guido coming at you with the Tactics Talk. Welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. And as you can see, I've got an Italian tank here. That's not very special, is it? It's been out for about 6 months. You know, one thing we're really good at in World of Tanks is getting super excited for new tanks coming out. And then there's the hubbub and the hype, and is it good, is it bad, should I grind it, should I ignore it, is it trash, is it overpowered, all those things. And that all happens, it seems like, in the first few weeks they come out. And then you never hear anything about them again. The Italian tanks. Decided to do this video, and I wanted to take another look at the Italian heavy line and see if it's worth grinding up. And as I started to do this video series, I said, well, how long have they been out? A year or so? It seems like a year. Do you know they came out in January of 21? They've only been around 6 months. Can you believe that? 21 and 20, those were some long years, aren't they? They're like dog years, those 2 years. 7 years of 2020 and now 7 years of 2021. But it's a 6-month-old line. It's the heavy tanks for the Italians. It's got a special auto reloading system, although not on the tier 7. That's what's right here in my garage right now. The Carro P.88. So we're going to go ahead and go through these. I will also put down in the description my reviews of the tanks when they first came out, and we'll see how they hold up. How does that review stand up to my opinion on these tanks now, and is the Italian line worth grinding? All right, break. There's two answers to that. The first one is the Guido answer. Is a line worth grinding? Yes, because I like the game. I like grinding all the lines, but you may not have the time to do all of them. So then the question becomes, usually, is it a good line? Which then is pretty much most people's reason for grinding, right? Or definition of whether a line is worth grinding. Is it good? The Italian line is average. There's a couple gems in it that I like quite a bit. We'll talk about those and why. The first one actually happens to be the Carro P.88. So we're going to start with that one and talk real quickly about some general overview stuff. Now, I mentioned that the Italian line has a special auto reloading system. If you have a Progetto medium tank, you're familiar with it, with a little bit of a change for the heavies. The first shell is the longest to reload, and then it gets less time-wise. As the reload goes, you start to get a bonus if you fire that shell on the next reload, so that it's a little less time to get your next shell reloaded. There's a little beep. There's 4 of those beeps in there. You'll see that in some of the replays, and that's how the auto reloader works. We look at the tech tree. You can see it splits off of the P43 BIS. They call the Carro P.88 a transition tank, so it does not have the auto reloader. Okay, or auto reloader. The Progetto 54, 66, and Rinceronte do, and in addition to that, the Basante, which is the premium heavy tank with the auto reloader, also has it. So the Carro P.88 does not. These first 3 are 4-person crews, commander, gunner, driver, loader, with the radio operator being on the commander slot. The Rinceronte loses the loader, and that function goes to the commander. I don't like that. I wish Wargaming would not do that, but we may see that kind of thing changed in Crew 2.0 or 2.1 or whatever version we end up getting. So that's the general overview right there, and we're going to start with the Carro. So let's take a look at the Carro. How has it done stats-wise? And then we'll have a little bit of a gameplay example for you. All right, let's start off with the Carro P.88. Remember, this is the Tier 7 heavy without the auto reloader. Really quickly, let's just do a quick comparison against the Tiger 1. Remember that this is a tech tree tank, so I don't really want to compare it against any of the premiums at Tier 7. And really quickly, the Tiger 1 just has it in just about every area, minus perhaps gun depression, and it's only -7 to -8. Look at the Carro at 0.4 gun dispersion, 0.33 for the Tiger. I don't know why the Carro works. I think it has a lot to do with its armor profile. If you look at the 2 armor profiles, they're very similar in millimeters of thickness. However, the Carro is quite angled and is a small, low-slung tank. It's pretty long, but it's actually fairly low-slung. And from the front, it has a very small armor profile. and with the angles can be quite bouncy. Whereas like the Tiger has a very flat plate kind of configuration right there. The Tiger's even faster. So if we just purely go off of this, you might say, well, nearly every Tier 7 tank is better than the Carro, but I'm telling you, the Carro just works. It really does, even with a 0.4 dispersion, which is pretty bad overall at Tier 7. So we'll take a look at some gameplay. I just wanted to throw that comparison up real quick right there. How have I done with the Carro? Well, we've only played 34 battles, but we're sitting 65% with over 1,000 experience per game. Average right there, we got a 1471 DPG on this bad boy. The armor use at 0.46. This is the thing that is surprising, I think. And what it does for you is it keeps the Carro in the fight. 0.5 is good situational armor. 1.0 means you're, a Malshin or a Mouse or something, and you're taking all kinds of hit. Anything at 0.2 or less, you virtually no armor, just the occasional lucky angle bounce. But this thing has good situational armor. It really does, and it will surprise people the amount that it can bounce based on the angles that it has, even though the thickness is not amazing on this thing. So there's nothing you can hang your hat on the Carro that you would say this is a great tank because of X. But the whole package actually works pretty nicely. Now let's take a quick look at some gameplay with the Carro P.88. All right, here's a battle ongoing in the old Carro P.88. Pushing in, I'm working with the 50 TPPR 1 tier down. Always a good idea with this tank to have some help. It's a good idea with every tank, but this tank especially, because it just doesn't have that, lots of hit points, super armor brawling thing. But pretty good depression, pretty good speed. You can see I'm pretty far into the backfield. I've got the Lurva and the ARL pinned down right here, trying to figure out a way to get a shot on these guys. I don't know what the Lowe's trying to crawl up the wall right there. He's going to back out looking for a shot on me, maybe. Looks like the ARL might be trying to come around. So we've got what else we got here? We got a T29 as well. So we're just keeping them all at bay while the team starts to roll in behind them. So T29 decides to not look at me, so that's going to give me an opportunity. And look, there's that bounce. You know what I'm saying? There's that surprise bounce. The IKV's thinking, well, geez, those don't seem like very heavily armored tanks. I should be able to pummel that guy pretty quick. So I can see the Lurvas coming around. I also don't want to get engaged necessarily face-to-face with the Lurva, if I can avoid it. And he sort of bails out from trying to do that. So we'll come around here. And it does require some aiming, although I did get a bit of a snap right there. My configuration is 0.39. There's another bounce off that IKV, right? And while the IKV doesn't have tons and tons of pen, it's actually pretty good for a little TD at Tier 7 like that. So we'll come in, we'll put a little shot in that guy's back. We do eat a shot from the ARL, and he ends up hurting our gunner right there. Or our loader, sorry. So we're trying to get reloaded. And I guess I didn't notice it. There's a little bounce. Gotta like that. Just a bad shot by me right here trying to get into the hatch, and I actually bounce off the top of the armor. Watching for the Lurva to come around. There we go. He takes a shot, and I'm just going to come off at this guy. But he dies before I can do anything about it. Be nice if I could realize that my loader is dead. Couple tanks sitting up there, looking for a shot. There we go. Come around the corner. Looks like the 50 TP is pushing in on the Lurva, so we'll come around that corner and help him. And like I was saying, if you can get this thing in with a couple buddies, because it has a relatively fast reload, and even though it's only doing 240 alpha, you come in here and you will start to surprise people with how fast you're shooting. We'll go to the back of the turret. Nice flat plate shot right there. He's nice and pinned. Down he goes. Somewhere in there I realized my loader was dead. And off we go. So not an amazing super destruction game, but 1,403. A good work-a-day kind of game in the Carro. And that's how I feel like this tank plays. It's just a good all-rounder. You're not going to get in the Carro and do something like, say, a T-29 going hull down, monster mode, my turret is impenetrable kind of thing. Or Tiger 1, here comes the DPM god, I'm spitting shots downrange constantly. You're not going to do that. Or the IS, here comes the 390 alpha monster, right? And I'm going to smack you for 390 alpha and you are not going to like it. The Carro is just an all-rounder. It really is. And I've said this, I think you're going to find, I've said this in my first review of it, that for some reason the sum of the parts, the sum of this tank is better than the parts. You take a look at all the numbers, the various statistics, and you'll say, wow, what a very mediocre average tank. Well, you put all that together and it really has no weaknesses. Then the surprising armor layout, and what you have is a solid tier 7 heavy tank. I'm not telling you it's going to be at the top of the list. It's right in the middle. If you look at the stats for 6 months of gameplay in this thing, it's solidly in the middle on win rate and win 8. It is certainly not down in the basement where I think a lot of people think it is, because it just isn't. So it's a solid all-rounder. I think it's a hidden gem. I happen to like it. But I'm not going to tell you it's the best tier 7 heavy. I'm going to tell you it's a solid tier 7 heavy. Let's move on to the 8. All right, once you finish the tier 7, you're going to move on to the tier 8, and that's going to have the auto reloader mechanism in it. The first tank then is the Progetto CC55 Mod 54. Here it is in garage. I've got the Dazzle camo on it, and I've got some of the Roman decals. As well, you can see it's got a decently angled front hole right there. It's got some angle on the turret, but the armor is less effective than the Carro's armor overall. I found it. It's not bad at something like 0.36 armor use efficiency, but of course it sees 9s and 10s, and that's really where you start to see the pen really ramped up. So some of those tanks are not going to have much trouble with it. It feels more like a sluggish medium tank to some extent. Not quite as fast as a medium tank, maybe not as agile or flexible, and that's not really great because it's a heavy tank, right? It feels like a very kind of lightly skinned heavy tank. But it's not even 5100 kind of unique where it's quick and gets around the battlefield. It's an interesting, I think, transition between the Carro and the 9 and 10 in that it starts to add some armor, but it doesn't add a bunch. It's got the auto reloader. It's not really surprising armor profile as much as the 7. And I guess what I'm getting at, the bottom line here, guys, is the 8's the worst of the lot. All right, for the Italian heavies, I believe the 8's probably the worst of the lot. The Basante is well better than it, and that's the premium tank. But let's take a look at this thing stats-wise here real quick, and then we'll do a quick comparison. I got 37 battles in it at 54%, 971 average XP. It's not bad. You know, you're going to find it if you look at any of the stat sites. It's going to be in the bottom third of heavy tanks at tier 8. But there are a lot of tier 8 heavy tanks. So being in the bottom third means there's a bunch of tanks above you, just by sheer numbers. I'm running 1821 DPG. There's that armor profile, 0.34 armor use efficiency, so usable at times, but not amazing. And it's not a hold down monster where the turret's amazing. Those bounces are coming because the angles are actually pretty good. There's no one great thing on this armor-wise. We'll see that in just a minute. 83% hit rate, so what you're going to see out of this tank is it takes the kind of wonky Carro P.88 0.4 dispersion and gets a 0.36 dispersion out of the gun, which makes it a much more comfortable gun. Plus you've got the auto reloading mechanism going on. So let's take a look then at a comparison between it and the Emil. So these are both tech tree tanks. They're both auto loaders of sorts. One's an auto reloader, one's an auto loader. So remember, the Emil does not have the option to shoot, reload a shell, shoot, reload a shell. It shoots 3 shells and then it has to reload everything. Or you shoot one and you force a reload for the whole clip. So that is a bit of a difference. It's running a 360 alpha, whereas the Progetto's got a 320, 220 penetration. And unfortunately, and I think this may be one of the biggest weaknesses of this tank, and it's where it struggles to take on 9s and 10s, is you dab 2 and you're getting an APCR round that only has about 242 pen. And that is so anemic against some of the 9s and 10s out there. So I think one of the problems this has is finishing against the more heavily armored tanks. It's supposed to be a heavy tank. You want to do heavy tank things, but taking on 9s and 10s, even the mediums, can be a little bit painful because 242 just isn't enough pen, even with the gold round. So the auto reloading mechanism we talked about, 41 seconds total to get 3 shells, whereas the Emil is at 26 seconds. Again, remember the mechanic is slightly different. There's a little more flexibility with the Progetto on being able to shoot a little bit more often, whereas the Emil is going to have to dump all 3 or press C and reload everything. Gun traverse is okay. Depression at -9, very usable. The Emil has that special extra depression that the Swedish heavies have right there. Aiming time's okay at 3.04. The Emil can be very painful to aim in, and there's that .36, an upgrade over the Tier 7. So you're going to find the gun to be much more comfortable on the 8 than the 7, but the rest of the package falls down a little bit. Holes at 100, turrets at 180, which is okay, usable. The Emil is at 180, but it's got that highly angled and then the nice depression, so any hold down fighting you with the Emil is pretty awesome. The Progetto is acceptable at the hold down fighting thing. You look at that and you're like, all right, that's where we get the .36 armor use efficiency. Mobility is decent at 45, not quite as fast as the Emil. It surprised me actually just a little bit. The reverse speed is atrocious at 12. It has a hard time getting out of its own way, trying to back out. So when you're using a tank like this where you want to take a shot and get back and then get right back into it, that reverse speed is going to catch you out just a little bit. And the hit points at 1450 are actually pretty decent for the tier. Get down to concealment, yeah, it's as good as you get in a heavy tank. And 370 on the view range is okay for a tier 8. So when I talked about the 7 having the sum of its parts was actually pretty good, and if you looked at the parts, they didn't seem great. On this one, you look at it, and it's kind of the opposite, in that some of the parts don't look great, and you put them together, and they're not great. You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't quite get there, and really, I think it's the gold round not having enough penetration to handle certain situations. You're just going to be ineffective in certain places trying to do heavy tank stuff. And the armor is going to let you down a little bit because it's not quite as good as you might like to do heavy tank stuff. So really what you want to do with this is be more of a second line guy or a support guy, or maybe even run with the mediums and then bring that auto reloader into play when you can, putting down the near deads. And as with any auto loader, if you can get it with some hit points into the mid to late game, it can be absolute monster as you're tearing down people with the auto reloader mechanism. So let's take a quick look at some gameplay. All right, here we are on Proc. I am trying to be more of that support kind of tank. Strange little bug actually here where some of the stuff is red and some is purple as I went into colorblind mode. So we get some shots in here. I'm firing and I've decided to go to the APCR. I've got an ST1, an STI up there that I want to try to take on. We take down the Scorpion there. We've got some damage. And this is kind of where this auto reloader tank sort of shines, when you're able to take shots and just sit there and fire away. So in that case, I went ahead and took the shot instead of waiting for the entire clip to reload, and I'm into the next reload. And I don't think we talked about, well, we clearly didn't talk about it on the Carro because it didn't have the reload mechanism, but go ahead and listen for the beeps. There's 1, 2, 3. There we go. So each one of those represents a faster reload if you happen to fire the shell that is in the clip. Boom. Boom. And we've got all 3. So there you go. That's what you're listening for right there. And if I had fired the shell, the second shell that was loaded, the shell that was reloading would have happened a little bit faster. The closer you get to being done reloading, the more bonus to the reload that you get. So we see some guys kind of moving around here. I am not going to go forward. Look, we're in a tier 9 and 8 battle right here. I know they've got some guys down this lane. The accuracy of .36, I've got a pretty good crew. I've got the equipment. It's going to bring it down to a fairly accurate gun, but this is more of a sniper kind of gameplay. So we're going to actually speed this thing up a little bit. There we go. So we find the ST1. I'm going to very carefully aim in. We get a bounce. We get a hit for 317 and another hit for 348. So boom, 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 and now we're into the reload. And that's kind of the strength of any auto loader or auto reloader. Given the opportunity to drop them all down range and hammer somebody, that's what you're going to try to do. So we get the reload. You can see that the first one is the longest. It gets shorter as it goes. There's the beeps. And now we're going to the next one. Alright, so we'll just go forward here. Pretty quickly we start moving up, and notice I'm not out in front doing the brawling. I'm up here looking for shots. There we go. We got a guy over here. We're at 1400 damage. Looking for shots. There's the STI again, so we'll just look for his lower plate. One. Put another one. That missed. And we armor not hit. So he's angled right there. Not the best shots. Maybe should have gone for the lower plate on that one. And while I'm reloading moving forward, this is something you need to learn to do with your autoloaders and auto reloaders. Reposition during the long reload to get into a better spot to take your shots. So we'll take the auto reloader up here and look for more shots. I don't want to push down the 1-2 line anymore. My guys are sort of getting stalled. I know there's hit points over here. I've also got a platoon mate that's up on the hill, and I want to try to make sure that the hill gets taken care of, or we come up and over on the 5-6 line, clean those guys out, and then we can start worrying about the 1-2 line. So we're about to win this. We're about to win this flank over here. Maybe if we can get rid of the Type 59. Now we're totally reloaded, and we can get into the fight here and just start putting shots on guys. We get one on the guy. He snaps me. Pretty good shot on his part. That's the Tier 9 version. And we'll back out. Get reloaded real quick. There's the difference between an auto loader and an auto reloader. I took the one shot and I just had to wait a little while. I get the third shot back in there. I don't have to hit C and reload the entire clip like I would on a standard auto loader. Now I'm back in the fight with the 3 shots. E75 takes a couple big hits moving in. He kills off the WZ, or somebody kills off the WZ. Looks like maybe the WT did. And then I get a hit, and I think he might have been actually shooting at the E75, so I saved the E75 from destruction, and we'll go ahead and push on in here. We've got 2,000 damage. We'll just fast forward. We get a light there. Now we're working our auto loader over this way. We know the 1-2 line is clear. There's only 3 of them left. Cleanup on aisle 2 at the end of games is always nice with auto loaders or auto reloaders, provided you can get in there completely loaded. You'll just take a shot like that. Just take another one on, boom, and we'll just give this guy one more shot here. Boom, and push down. Probably eat a shot from one or both. The RHM actually missed. So I'm going to go ahead and work my reload here. Just auto load him here. I'm just going to take that first shot. Didn't have to, somebody else killed him. But the option there was to take that first shot and not wait for the rest of the reloads. And we push on in here. We got 3,129. So I think a good example, I don't think I got any more damage in there. Somebody else kills him. Good example of the auto reloader mechanic and having a good game in this tank by not being too far up in front and in people's faces. I think it's the worst of the 4, to be quite honest. It's not a terrible tank. Like I said, you're going to find it in the bottom third of the stats on most servers and most stat sites that you look at. So it's not exactly a basement dweller. It does have some things going for it. It's decently mobile. The auto reloader's a pretty good, fun mechanic when allowed to be used in the right way. I will caution you on one thing with this, though. Don't be a one-shot guy where you're always reloading the first shell and then shooting it. You've got to be patient at some points, and sometimes that's going to mean passing up some opportunities to get all 3 shells or maybe even just 2 shells loaded. When you're doing some brawls, it might be an opportunity to do that, especially if they're worried about getting the hit from the shell that's loaded. That may give you some time to load the other 2, and then when you make the push, you can get 3 shells out really quickly right there. So the timing on when you use a 1 shell and when you don't, that's something you're going to have to work on with the auto reloaders, because it can be a little bit different kind of gameplay style. And there's a decent fear factor of people know, even if you jumped out and fired 3, they know you're back in the fight pretty quick. Whereas if it was in a mill and you fired all 3 and backed up, they know they've got a pretty long time before you're going to shoot again. So that may get them brave and have them come at you. All right, let's look at the Tier 9. Well, all right, what about the Tier 9, which we've got here in the garage? This is, of the 4, the best in my opinion. The Tier 9 is a bit of a hidden gem. I'm not going to tell you it's the best Tier 9, but it's actually a solid, pretty dang good Tier 9 heavy tank. It's going to get a pretty good buff to the whole armor. The turret is not great, but it's got some weird angles that can help out. Right there, it's carrying the auto reloader as well. Just take a quick look at how I've done in this thing. So we've got 45 battles with a 53%, almost 1,000 experience per game, hitting at 76.89%. The armor use at 0.46, now we're starting to creep back up to a usable situational armor profile. Not amazing, but more heavy tankish. I'm averaging 2,139 on the damage with that right there. Let's take a quick look at a comparison. I've got the 5120, the AMX. Now the AMX 5120 does not have the armor that this thing has, so it's not exactly a fair comparison necessarily because this is carrying more armor, but what you're trading in the 5120 is a little bit more firepower for less armor, and you're getting a little bit more armor in the Progetto 66. Now upgrading from the 8 to the 9, you're going to get a 400 alpha. Now 320 is okay at tier 8 these days, but not amazing. There's not a lot of fear factor. This thing is now getting into the region where it can really dish out some pain with 3 400 alpha shots. So that is a pretty big upgrade. The penetration is at 242, which is actually pretty darn good for standard rounds, and it gets a heat round that goes above, I believe it's 303 penetration, so you no longer have the anemic special round that the tier 8 has, which makes this thing just more flexible for dealing with other 9s and 10s, especially the heavily armored stuff. So that is a huge bonus. You're talking over 50 extra, up close to 60 more penetration from its gold round than the tier 8, and that was one of the biggest failings of the tier 8. Here are the reload times: 15 seconds, 13, and 12. Remember, it's long to short, and the total would be 41 seconds, whereas the 5120 is going to do it in 34 seconds and have 4 shells. Remember, that's the standard auto loader, vice the auto reloader, and all the subsequent differences that I talked about. A nice -9 depression and +20, very comfortable. Aiming time at 2.59 is okay, and now we get even better dispersion at 0.35, so the gun becomes a lot more comfortable even than the tier 8. So now we've got a better armor profile. If we look at the whole armor, it's 130, quite usable. Like I said, the turret's a little bit indifferent, not amazing at 195, but the whole with its angling is quite good. So you're getting a little bit more bounces, a little bit better armor profile, a more comfortable gun, better alpha, especially for tier at 400, and a little bit more accurate gun. So you're just an overall better tank with the ability to press 2 and handle stuff. So it just comes out, all that put together, better than the tier 8 does at tier 8. So this does better at tier 9 than the tier 8 does at tier 8. 45 is decent speed, not as fast as the 5120, which is more of a flex kind of auto loader, if I say heavy brawler. And I'm not telling you that this is going to get in there and duke it out with Malshin's armor-wise, or with, VKs, things like that, but it's useful, usable, and can do the frontline brawler thing. Okay, if it has to. You'd still rather play it more like you're going to play the tier 8 as a support tank, but it has a little bit better brawling ability of getting forward and dishing out the pain and being able to take some along the way as well. And it's got pretty decent hit points, as I recall, as I find where it went, somewhere in here at 1,850, which is really pretty good survivability wise. Nice side armor of 70, which is going to help the overmatch stuff there. Who cares about stationary and moving count on a heavy, and the view range at 390, which is right up there where you want to be. So this is a tank that you look at the stats and go, all right, this is something I can use, put these all together, and it ends up being a pretty darn good heavy tank at tier 9 with the auto reloader function, which means I can dish out 1,200 in fairly quick order. Now, I haven't talked too much about the intra-shot reload time or the wait. It's 3 seconds. That is long. All of these auto reloaders have a fairly long time. So you're talking shoot, 3 seconds, second shot, 3 seconds, third shot. So 6 to 8, depending on aiming, maybe 9 seconds to get all 3 down range. This is not a tank that you're necessarily going to jump out and go pow, pow, pow. All right? So you're still going to want to fight it more like a cyclical gun, with the opportunity that if you're not in danger of trading poorly and you can hang out and continue to drop it down range, in 6 to 8 seconds you can drop 1,200 on people. And that's that's pretty darn good. I mean, you can clean up guys that have taken a hit or two pretty quickly. I mean, if you look at it's only 1,850, somewhere around 1,500 to 2,000 hit points at tier 9. Say they take a hit or two, all of a sudden you are in danger of clipping them out, provided you have the opportunity and it is that kind of permissive environment that you can come out there and do that. But that is a fear factor that exists with this tank, and if people know you're reloaded and they're going to get one shot and you're going to get three, that changes the things that they may want to try to do. All right, so there is certainly in this case a fear factor, and I did not find that same fear factor necessarily on the tier 8, which is why I like the tier 9 best out of the 4 right here. Let's take a look at some gameplay with the Progetto 66. Okay, with the tier 9, I tend to play these a little more aggressively. I get a little bunged up with Grinny right there. There's that shot, reload shot. So the KR takes 2 big hits right away, and that is one of the things this tank can do very nicely. The problem really, and I'm just punched a shot right straight through that guy's turret right there, more pen obviously. The problem with getting too crazy about comparing an 8 to a 9 is 8s are going to see +2, 9s are only ever going to see +1. So that's one reason right off the bat that you can a little more reliably fight this tank in a bit more brawly kind of mode, especially in this case we're top tier, and I'm not too afraid of really any of these guys. To be quite honest, none of the heavily armored guys came up here anyway. Looks like the 257 at least is down below down there, and maybe even the 50 TP. So I have taken my decently mobile, pretty heavily armored heavy tank with the auto reloader, and I'm just up here absolutely waylaying the mediums top tier. So take a couple shots. Now I'm fading back. Now I don't want to come around this corner unless I've got all 3 of my shells, or I'm given a good opportunity to put a shell into somebody. I mean, I will take shots before I'm completely reloaded. Now here comes the train. But I'd really love to have some time to get everything sorted out, get totally reloaded, and the whole train is coming now. So this is just a world of hurt for the guys that are hanging out back here. So let's see what this auto reloader can do. Come up here, we'll take a shot. I think, no, I hit that one. This guy's trying to get away. Put a shot into him. And we still have a shot, right? We're still coming in here. Try one more. Put a shot into him. Just absolute obliteration. Some RNG came out and said, hello, Guido. Let me help you out with that. And now I'm just up here trying to see what's going on. And here comes the train. So guys are going. I'm thinking, well, I'd really love to wait and reload, but all those hit points are going to be gone if I don't get going. I think I actually bounced this shot, unfortunately. Nope, yep, bounced that shot because I auto him and went right into his strongest armor right there. And even though I was kind of higher than he was, we were at the same angle, so that didn't work out so great. But I'm reloading as I go. And I get a little in a kerfuffle with the leopard. I don't mean to actually ram into him, but holy cow, there's a whole train coming and he just stops. Now we're all ramming into each other. I'm like, dude, let me get out of the way here. Okay, there we go. Sorry, my friend. I mean, if you should have just gone. All right, so we come in here, and now we've got reloaded. We take one. You know, maybe I should have waited. Put another one in there, because now I'm on my longest reload, right? So we'll just come in here in amongst these guys and get them looking in every direction. I'll take a hit from him. I'll fix the turret. If we can get these guys looking in as many directions as possible, let's go right here to that weak spot. Right into the driver's hatch. Get the guys turned around so everybody can shoot them from multiple angles. I don't know why everybody didn't just get in there and do that, but everyone, very strange. That's how it goes in this game, I think, sometimes. And it's all over with the shot. I mean, just an absolute romple stomp. 4,413 damage. Mostly this replay was, obviously you're not going to have a game like this every time. Mostly this replay was showing you that when you've got that auto reloader and when you do pushes and things like that, we'd have won that push anyway, but how fast a tank like this can take guys down. And that can really collapse even close games. I mean, say this game was closer, we were up there, the fight was still dragging on down below, but I come through and I knock out 3 near deads like that, and that just breaks open the flank. That's what this kind of tank can do. Given the right opportunity and situation, it's absolutely brutal when it comes to that. And then from then, you know, it's just managing the auto reloader. Do I wait for all 3 shells, or do I go with the crowd and take a shot or 2 and then reload on the move? Because I can look at it and go, well, if we kill these 3, I have a long drive to the next couple tanks and I'll get my auto reloader going on for there. But the beauty of it is, unlike other auto loaders, you do kind of have that option. And the thing about regular autoloaders is if you take a shot and go, man, I want to get a full clip, and you hit C to full reload, and all of a sudden you get pushed, you're not in the fight. Whereas these things can potentially still be in the fight. Say I took 2 shots, I still have a shell, I retain that, I wait for the next 2 to go. If they get jiggy over there and decide to push me, at least I have that 1 shell, and another one is going to come up after it. Although it's going to be quite a long reload, it's better than 30 or 40 seconds with an auto loader, the standard auto loader. I think this is the best of the 4. I quite like this one. It's quite a strong tank. I wouldn't say it's the best tank at Tier 9 heavy, but it does heavy things much better than the Tier 8 does. And it's not quite as quirky maybe as the Tier 7 is. And we'll get to the 10 in just a minute, but I just think at the Tier 9 really is the best of the bunch. All right, let's look at the Tier 10. A little controversial on that one. The old Rinceronte, the Tier 10. This is an interesting one, and it probably is a few buffs away from being completely overpowered. This one is tricky to balance. First of all, it's Tier 10, so it doesn't have any 11s or 12s to keep it down if it does get overpowered. I think Wargaming erred way towards the underpowered side of it, and it really lives at the bottom half to bottom third of the stats. Even if you can find a stat site that's showing it, because very few people play the tank. I like it. It's got a couple of cool things going for it, but I'm not going to tell you that it's a fantastic Tier 10. If we go back to the very beginning of the video where the question was asked, hey, is it worth grinding the line? Generally, everybody's looking at the 10. Do I want to get to the 10? This one's kind of a hard sell, but if you like quirky tanks that in their element can be kind of beastly, then this is probably a line for you to go through, or you may want to stop at the 9 because the 9's quite good at Tier 9. But eventually you're going to play the 9 enough and get the Rinceronte unlocked, so if you've got the credits, why not buy it? Let's talk about it a little bit. It's quite an interesting looking tank, different looking tank right there. Remember, it's gone down to 3 crew members, so the commander right here is now doing the loader operations, as I recall. We'll make sure that is true, correct. And that is unfortunate because you've had a loader this whole time and you've built up skills in the loader. There's a couple of good loader skills, and the commander skills are very good too. And now you've got to try to respec and figure out if any of the loader skills are going to go on your commander, who's already probably full of good commander skills. I don't like that. That's a bummer. I hope Wargaming fixes that sometime in the near future, but that's a video for another time. It's fairly low slung. Kind of hard to hit, being one of the smaller heavy tanks out there. I mean, if we look at an E100, holy cow, it's not even close to an E100. But let's say a Kron. A Kron's a little bit taller. 705 is surprisingly small. I don't know if you realize that, but it's actually not much smaller, or not much bigger than a Rinceronte, actually. So let's take a quick look at the comparison here, and then we'll look at my stats, and we'll make some callbacks to that. But I've got it up against the 50B, which is again the Italian tank, like the 5120. It's the faster, lighter armored version, and it's an auto loader. Now, one thing I haven't talked about so far on the 3 auto reloaders is the DPM tends to be very, very low, worst in class for the most part on all of the Italian auto reloaders. In fact, it's worse than the auto loaders, who tend to be anemic anyway, just because if the DPM was as high as a cyclical gun and you had an autoloader, which means you'd be reloading your clip relatively quickly, that's a recipe for an overpowered tank. Because there's flexibility with the auto reloaders, such as the Rinceronte, because they can get back into the fight, they've been very careful with the reloads and made sure that the DPM is quite anemic and low. So you've got the flexibility of the boom, boom, boom out of it. You can still be in the fight even if you do the 3 boom, boom, booms there, but at the same time the reloads are so slow, your DPM is relatively low. Now this is a problem, because if you're talking a 3, 4, 5 minute game, there's only so many shots you can get in that amount of time with a tank like this. The longer the games go for the auto reloaders, the more powerful they become, and long games even more so. The question is, can you get there, and will the tank last that long? And that's the trick. Right, that is the trick. So we go look at the Rinceronte, 490 deep on the alpha. That's huge. That's a big stick, and you got 3 of those bad boys. So you can really drop some pain. But look at the reloads, almost 20 seconds for the first shell, 16, 15.4, a total of 51 seconds to get all 3 shells loaded in there. It's got the same mechanism, where as you get closer, you happen to shoot that shell, the next one is a little bit faster. But again, with the 3 seconds between the shells, in the auto reloader. So again, you're not going to jump out and go boom, boom, boom. You're going to go boom, 1001, 1002, 1003, boom. All right, but it's there if you can get it downrange. -10, really nice on the depression. Turret is a little wonky as far as the shapes. It's okay in terms of hold down. I would not count on it for bouncing because when we jump down here, it's only 190. Slightly worse actually than the 9, but better angles and more depression. Whole armor same at 135. So whereas the 9 starts to get a little beefy and feels more like a heavy tank guy, the Rinceronte then turns back into this kind of strange support tank guy that isn't quite as fast as a 50B support tank guy and kind of wants to be a heavy tank guy and really doesn't quite get there on either one of them. However, the gun is very comfortable. 1.92 aiming time, 0.32 on the dispersion. Very nice as far as comfort of getting the gun online, taking a shot right there. It's just that you do not want to expose. Hit points at 2,000 are okay. Talked about the armor. The weight load limit is pretty good, and that gets us to 40. You're like, what, 40? Well, the MX-50B is really fast for a heavy tank, so 40 is pretty decent for a tier 10. 390 on the view range, which is nice, and then, as far as camo goes, it's one of the stealthiest heavy tanks in the game, if that helps at all. Penetration is 268, and actually I didn't look at the gold round, so let's take a quick look at that. It's another heat round, and it jumps up to 325. Quite usable. All right, quite usable for the heat round. Now that we have a change with the round, actually, I'm sorry, the heat did not get touched. Never mind on that. So watch out. Well, sort of. It can pen, right? So it can pen the tracks. All right, which it's always been able to do. I don't know who. It's been a long day. All right. How did I do in the Rinceronte? Well, I finally got 20 battles in it. So we're at 55%. 851 is low. I would like that to be more like 900. So I'm still figuring this tank out. You can see that the armor use efficiency is 0.5. So despite the fact that I'm saying the armor isn't great, I'm still having some luck with those situational bounces. But at tier 10, a heavy tank, you'd really like to see that a little higher so you can do heavy tank things. That just drives it more into the support class. 81% hit rate, which is nice. That speaks to the accuracy of the gun right there. And all the other stats doing pretty good. 2200 is not amazing for damage caused. I have found that my DPG on all the auto reloaders is a little bit lower than the rest of that same tier heavy tank, just because it does take a little bit getting shots down range. And again, you need to survive. I am sitting at 50%, which is pretty good. That's going to help me out with getting some shots down range out of this thing. All right, let's take a look at some gameplay with the Rinceronte. I will join this fight in progress. Kind of taking the BC12 area. Now we're moving up with our auto reloader. We're top tier, so this is a really good situation for this tank. Here's that -10 depression, and here's that high. I have 3 490 alpha shells. Which one of you wants them first? And both of them say, I don't want them. And the other one says, no, me either. But I say, you can have it. Of course, they're going to come out, jump out, and get a shot. And then I'm just going to drop another one on them. We end up bouncing the shot off the 140. That's very nice. We got 940 bounce. So that speaks to that situational 0.5 armor profile. As long as you don't get out in front of them and start letting them shoot at your lower plate or take shots at whatever weak spot or angle that works best for them, you're doing that nice -10% hold down kind of thing. -10% on the depression. It's all good. Now I'm going to hang out back here, and this is just a very long time to reload to be out of the fight. Sometimes fights get away from you in that amount of time. I'm going to come up here with 2 shells, and I'm going to go ahead and just shoot these right now, because I don't want this to get away. I want this dude to take a hit. Let's drop 2 shells on him. There we go, and we get him down to a manageable level, and we'll back out. Again, this is that question right here. Do I wait for the 3rd shell and maybe have a chance to take him out, and probably take him out? And that would have cost me another 5, 6, 7 seconds. Or do I put those 2 hits in now because I have a couple near deads over here and get them into range? That's always a question, and you don't always make the right answer. I'm starting to get hit by the 53, 55s in this game. The 268 version 4 wants to come in. I get to reload, and now I'm going to take out a guy with just very few hit points, but we'll get rid of him. See, there's that. I'm still in the fight. I didn't have to wait for the entire clip to reload, but I still now have that long 20-second, which can feel a lot like a standard auto loader just for how long it takes. So the 268 version 4 is pretty quickly going to figure out he needs to push in and do something. So I'm just going to take this shot. He pushes in. The 4202 is actually doing a pretty nice job dodging this guy. I'm getting hammered by Artie. All of a sudden, I'm down to very little hit points. I'm also stunned. 20 seconds of stun. Holy cow, it just takes forever to get reloaded here. The 4202 almost walks in front of it. Here comes the 430, maybe around the corner. I'll put a shot into the back of that guy, and down he goes. And that's that 490. Even though the long reload took a long time, I still had the nice 490. And unfortunately, my DPM is kind of crunched right here, right? I'm fighting with that first shell the whole time. Didn't quite have the opportunity to do it. And now if you look at where we are, potentially had I waited for the third shell to take out the Conway, that would have gone a lot better, right? I wouldn't have had to take that extra shell on the Conway, and so that just decreased my DPM by doing that. So we'll come over here and we'll hit this guy, put a nice hit into him, and we'll just push on in here. Already everybody's firing into that guy. We got two 53-55s. We're up to 4,395. And sometimes with this tank, this is what I've found. You look at your damage like, how did I even get there? You know, it just seemed like you were sort of just trolling along and playing. It's like, where did all this damage come from? Put a big hit on him for a nice high roll at 524. Turtle up because I am almost a one-shot, or potentially a one-shot to the Scorpion. He gets killed. And we'll just go ahead and zing on in here because it's always fun to watch Artie. I think I get some Artie shots here. Oh, one of them drowns. Yeah, perfect. I forgot about that. I believe I get the last one here. Oh, yeah, he's right there. It takes me a while to turn around. I'm flailing a bit. I'm actually turning my hull against the turn of the turret because I actually had my finger on the wrong key, as I recall right there. I don't know if the shot surprised me or what happened. 5,369 damage. We got 3 kills in there. We bounced 940 with 719 assist. Again, the auto reloader, if allowed to get to the end of the game like this, allowed to do its thing. I never really got pressed. I never really got pushed. If they were able to come out and come around me, I'm in big trouble because a 20-second reload just isn't going to keep me in the fight. So even though I was working with that first shell a lot, I was able to get it reloaded in time to make something happen. And on the couple occasions where I had a couple of shells, worked out really nicely. I'm able to put that 490 down range, and I think the big one there is potentially more than likely I should have waited for the third shell on the Conway, clipped him out, and then go on to the reload, and that would have worked out a lot better for me. I think that's a good example, though, for the kind of decision making you have to make with the Rinceronte and the auto reloading. It really is on the verge of just a couple buffs of being a little bit overpowered. You know, if you give it another shell in there, maybe that kind of thing. But 490 Alpha, when allowed to do its thing, can really kick some damage downrange. It just takes a long time to do it. All right, what's Guido's verdict? Is the Italian heavy line worth going down? 6 months after it's been released, the answer is, from Guido, yes, because I like all the content in the game. However, if you are not I want to have all the content, I got to catch them all kind of guy, and it is purely a calculation of what's the best tier 10 heavy, probably not the Rinceronte. Probably not the Rinceronte. So if you're a time limited or you just want to have the best, there's probably other good lines. However, if you're looking for an interesting gameplay mechanic, the auto reloader, and a couple good tanks in a half line in the Italian line, this may be right up your alley. And I think the Rinceronte is better than people say it is, to be quite honest. So we have the tier 7. Let's start with that one. I quite like it. It does not have the auto reloader on it. I think it is a lot better than people give it credit for, but I'm not telling you it's amazing. I would say it's in the upper half of heavy tier 7s. I would jump into the tier 8. This is the worst, I think, of the lot. Even worse, really, than the Rinceronte. It can be good if allowed to do its thing. Unfortunately, sometimes when it gets pressed, it really just gets outmatched armor-wise and DPM-wise. I quite like the tier 9. I think it's a gem in the line. It's probably, in my opinion, the best of all of them. It can do some heavy brawling stuff, and it's got the auto reloader that it can leverage. It just has, at tier, better capability than the rest of the line. The Rinceronte, not nearly as bad as people might say. I think it's better at tier 10 than the tier 8 is at tier 8, but perhaps not by much. It has unique gameplay. If allowed, as with the rest of them, to do its thing, it can really be quite the little beast. But it is probably of the, not probably, but definitely of all of them, it is the one that's easiest to get caught out in, simply because tier 10 is so brutal for getting caught out. Like, if you get caught out at tier 10, it's much worse than tier 7 or 8. And this thing has extreme strengths and extreme weaknesses, and if you're playing to its extreme weaknesses, you're going to have a bad day. That's just the way it is. And its strengths are good, but not so good that you would call it overpowered. So I think Wargaming's done a pretty good job of balancing what is really a difficult mechanic to balance overall. On the 10, I think they've erred towards the side of too weak. On the 9, I think it's good to slightly above average. On the 8, I think it's a little weak as well. Of course, the tier 7's a tier 7. Doesn't have the auto reloader. So there you go. There's my verdict on the Italian tanks after 6 months. Let me know what you think out there. They're not some of the most played tanks. The Basante, which I didn't talk about because it's a premium, is actually a pretty popular premium tank, and there are quite a few battles in the Basante. For the rest of them, they're not quite as popular. You don't see many Rincerontes or the tier 8s. You see a lot more of the tier 9s, probably because it's the best of the group out there. So let me know what you think down below. I appreciate you all coming by and checking out the video. Thanks for supporting the channel. If you're looking for other ways to do so, you'll find those down in the description, along with my reviews from 6 months ago on all 4 of these tanks. That's all I've got for today. We will see ya.